for the technical issue, but it looks like you all have found the questions box, not the chat box, probably due to a GoToWebinar setting that's different than Zoom. So thank you. You're all probably wondering why we couldn't find you chatting, but great to see the attendee names coming in, and thank you again for finding us despite the issues we have. Just to name off a couple of names here: Hannah from Explorer Washington Park in Portland. We have Cecily from, where are you from, Cecily? She didn't say her location. We have someone from Catherine from Seattle, Goodwill. Who else? Heartland Head Start in Bloomington, Illinois on the line. Forum 1 in Boston. We have Chelsea from the Elks National Foundation. A whole lot of great attendees. Martha in Chicago with the Robert R. McCormick Foundation. Hi, Martha. Martha's a client of ours. Good to see a client on the line. Found us despite the technical issue. Thank you everyone for chatting in. And yes, let's use the questions box since we had to make this last minute switch over to GoToWebinar. Thank you again for bearing with us. The room's starting to fill up. Have 165 people in the room now. So we're going to take a deep breath and make do with GoToWebinar and go ahead and get started here. So thank you, Kristine, for that nice introduction. Really appreciate the kind words about our manifesto. And I hope you can all see my screen. Please chat in the questions box if you can't. But if you haven't read the manifesto, you'll find a link to it here. And the 10 commitments in the manifesto, which we published last fall, is really the basis. The commitments are the basis for the series of webinars that really kicks off today. We did an introduction to the 10 commitments last month, but this month is our dive into the first of those 10 commitments. So excited to share them with you. If you haven't downloaded it, encourage you to go ahead and do that. You'll also find the manifesto, not as a download, but as a page on our website, so that if you prefer to read it and share it that way, that's available to you. So we're so excited to be partnered with Independent Sector for this webinar series for the entire year ahead. As Kristine mentioned, I'm the co-founder and president at Prosper Strategies, the leading marketing and communications consultancy for the nonprofit sector. And we're based in Chicago. Our firm, as many of you know, provides brand strategy and marketing planning services for social sector organizations. And because we only work with nonprofits, we see really a lot of similar challenges when it comes to marketing, from limited budgets to a lack of understanding of the role that marketing should be playing in the sector, to a failure to measure marketing's impact on mission outcomes. And last year, like I said, we published this in fall, but early last year, we really began to think about how we could offer some real actionable solutions to nonprofit-specific marketing challenges, things that we found nonprofits were facing across the country. And we wanted to reach beyond our client base and have a bigger impact on the sector as a whole. So our manifesto was the first answer about how we could do that. And we really believe the nonprofit sector needs a marketing revolution, and that this is sort of the rallying cry for that marketing revolution. We think that the nonprofit sector needs this not just because, nonprofits are behind the curve, as some people might like to say. We don't actually think that's true. We think nonprofits are really forward thinking and really care about driving their missions forward, but we have seen in so much of our work that the system's set up against nonprofit marketing. Funders and supporters and others who might make it possible for you to pursue marketing in a bigger and deeper way are kind of aligned against marketing. They like to talk about it, view it as overhead, as they like to do so many things in the nonprofit sector. And as a result, marketing doesn't get pursued at the level it should. So our big idea in the manifesto is really about changing that perception and changing opinions about the role that marketing can and should play in the nonprofit sector. So we believe that marketing can do so much more than just raise awareness about our organizations. It can contribute to every single goal that we set at our organizations. And when that happens, it becomes a true tool for mission impact and social change. But that's the gold standard, right? And realizing that ideal is far more easily said than done. So we included in our manifesto a set of 10 commitments. And if you were on the last webinar, you got an overview of about the first 5 of those 10 commitments, just as sort of a teaser of what's to come. But the 10 commitments are really our effort to make this concept and this opinion change, this idea of power that marketing can hold, make it a reality, make it actionable. So they include everything from aligning your brand with your mission and values to avoiding creating unintentional harm for the people you hope to serve through your marketing, to finding ways to measure marketing's mission impact. And if you want a refresher on what all the 10 commitments are, you can go back and watch that webinar after this one. But if you happen to miss it, don't worry, because today we're going to dive into the first commitment. That might be the most important commitment of all. And if you are engaged with this idea, you want to engage with it in a deeper way, like Kristine mentioned, this is one of a series of 13 webinars, so there will be one on each commitment each month here in the coming year. So a lot of great content to dig into, and hopefully this can be the spark for your own marketing revolution. So in order to try to make this more actionable, as we dive into this first commitment, we wanted to bring together some real practitioners in the field, some real leaders in the field who are living and breathing these commitments every day. And we wanted to talk to them about how this first commitment actually plays out in reality. So you will meet them, and I know you can't see them because of our camera setup, but you'll meet them through audio here in just a minute. We have Kristine and Danny. Kristine from Big Brothers Big Sisters of Metropolitan Chicago, and Danielle Veira, correct pronunciation? Yep. Got it. Okay, from A Better Chicago to talk with us here today about how they're living and breathing this commitment. So first, just to introduce you to it, the first commitment says that we will recognize marketing as a tool for driving mission impact and social change. We'll acknowledge that when it's leveraged properly by nonprofit organizations like ours, marketing really is capable of changing the world. And the whole manifesto is a mindset shift, but this commitment is a mindset shift more than any of the others. In our work, we see that nonprofits and those who fund them and support them still really misunderstand or deprioritize marketing, and they think that it's meant only for the corporate world, or they just simply don't pursue it at all. When they do, they often live in it to that really soft and nebulous world of awareness building, which is only one, obviously, tiny piece and part of what marketing can and should do. And like I said, this isn't something that we lay blame on the sector for all of you. It's really something that is ingrained in the way the sector is supported. So that's what this commitment aims to change. Sorry about the background noise. Undoubtedly someone calling saying they can't get onto Zoom. So, we really want to, with this commitment one, realize and get our whole teams on board with this idea that marketing can and should be so much more, that it's critical to mission impact. And until we make this shift, the rest of the commitments in the manifesto really can't ever be seen through. So it's that kind of linchpin commitment that we all need to make. And like I said, I know you might be thinking this all sounds good in theory, but what about in practice? And that's what I've asked Kristine and Danielle to join us to talk about. As I mentioned, they're two great examples of people living and breathing this commitment. So I'd like to spend the rest of our time today in Q&A with them, and I'm happy to see that we're continuing to fill up. People are finding the new access information. We have 203 people on board, so this should be a good discussion. I'd like to ask them a few of my own questions and questions that have come up in my work with clients, and then certainly leave time for all of you using, again, that questions panel where you've all found and been able to chat in to ask them additional questions from the audience. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Danny and Kristine here just to introduce themselves and give you a sense of their background and kind of how it applies to what we're talking about today.
Hi, I'm Kristine Brown. I am the Marketing Communications Director at Big Brothers Big Sisters here in Metropolitan Chicago. So our agency is actually an affiliate of the larger organization, the national organization. But we at Big Brothers Big Sisters here in Chicago really started to look at marketing about 3 years ago, which is kind of funny when I joined the organization. So before I joined the organization, Big Brothers Big Sisters here, this chapter did not have a marketing team. They did not have a marketing department or practice. My background is on the agency side. So I worked for larger CPGs, on the account side for Kraft and other CPG companies. And then I decided that I wanted to do something that was more mission-centric, more purpose-driven. So I went back to school. I got my master's at Northwestern in marketing, and then really thought that there could be an opportunity in the nonprofit sector to bring some of those skills over. So we have really, started to dig into marketing here in the local chapter and then on a national scale as well. So I'll be talking about that more later.
And I'm Veira. You can call me Danny. Danielle feels very good. And I am the Director of Communications and Engagement at A Better Chicago, which is a venture philanthropy org here in Chicago. We invest in education, nonprofits, and basically any bold ideas that can really change educational outcomes for kids here in the city, ranging from early childhood to college access and completion. So it's really an exciting time for me to kind of bring my talents to Chicago and be able to work with a really amazing and incredible team that's focused on mission-driven work. My background is actually in DC, so very familiar with the independent sector. I started my career on Capitol Hill working for a senator and transitioned into nonprofit communications pretty early in the game, right around after the 2008 election happened. And I've been doing global nonprofit work through agency or in-house work for the better part of a decade, working with nonprofits that are either based in the United States or abroad, along with some kind of like social change coalitions that are started by corporations. And my most recent position was at the American Diabetes Association, where I was the head of the advocacy, communications, and public relations side of things.
Thank you. Great intros, both of you. And like I said, they are both very inspiring examples to me of people who are in the field and really living and breathing this commitment. So I can't wait to dig in a bit more to a few of the questions we have for them today, and I hope you'll ask some questions too. Should mention, and I think Kristine may have said this, but feel free to chat in questions as we go along here, and we will try to come back and answer as many of them as we can. Ones that we can't, we'll try to follow up in our post-webinar blog post to make sure your questions get answered. So let's dive in and begin with our first question here. So this question I'd love to hear from both of you because you come from very different perspectives and backgrounds. I'd really just love to hear what commitment one means to you and how you approach your work, Kristine at Big Brothers Big Sisters and Danny at A Better Chicago, how it impacts the way that you work, the way you function within your organization, and the way that you approach marketing externally as well.
So for me personally and our entire team at Big Brothers Big Sisters, it really was a shift in mindset. So not only was it making it a priority, making sure that marketing was a part of our strategic planning, but that it also meant that us as an entire agency were more customer centric. So coming from the corporate world, as you'd say, we looked at each customer journey when we were looking at different things, and we looked at the different touch points and how we communicate to them. And that just wasn't really happening in our practice at all. So, one thing that we really noticed at Big Brothers Big Sisters is that, we create mentoring matches. So we pair bigs with littles. And what we found is that once that they were paired, they had this amazing relationship that continued for years and years, but they were losing connection to our agency and to our brand. That meant less to them than the relationship. So what we had to do is focus on those touch points throughout and make sure that that customer experience was something that we marketed from the minute that they're matched to the time that they become alumni and their match closes and they become, potential donors, things like that.
I would say for A Better Chicago, it's interesting because we're not a direct service organization. So a lot of our storytelling and marketing kind of has to come in the line of sharing the work that our grantees are doing and how we've been able to help them scale and grow and change the lives of so many more students across our city, but also to kind of incorporate a larger global change when it comes to how donors think about charity and how people think about giving in a strategic and impactful way. And so I was really lucky. I mean, I don't think in my intro I mentioned this, but I basically left DC, moved to Chicago just for this opportunity, and came here last August. So I've been in this role for not yet a year, but I was coming into a situation where my boss, our chief external relations officer, was very clear on the role that she wanted communications and marketing to play, but really wanted to bring in somebody that could grow that space in a way that brought out our storytelling, brought out our brand awareness, kind of refreshed the way that we talk about ourselves, and aligned us as thought leaders, but also as, true partners when it comes to how we talk about our grantees and the investments that we're making and the end goal, which is to end poverty in Chicago. So I would say that this commitment is probably like the leading mission for my role and also for our organization as a whole, because I am lucky enough to work with people that understand how important it is to communicate to the outside world what we do and why what we do is important, and how you as an individual can be part of changing the cycle of poverty and giving opportunity to children that don't currently have it. So it's like mission commitment number one is kind of like always in the back.
Everything.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the whole point.
Exactly.
And I think more and more as we do this work in the field, we're talking to people who have that same perspective that you do. And I think in this role, the perspective is changing a lot. Outside of this role, I'm not sure that the perception of marketing and its potential is the same. So really great. Like I said, you both very much inspire me. We've had Danny and Kristine on panels and things for Prosper before, and just hearing about what they do and how they're approaching their work, I think can be an example and inspiration for all of us. So more of that to come on the next question. So this really relates to what I was just talking about. This one again is for both of you, and we can start with you since you were just talking about this, Danny. Biggest struggle that you face when it comes to making the case internally for prioritizing marketing and communications as tools for mission impact. And I'd love to hear, I'm sure attendees would too, if you have any tips for them on what they can do if they're struggling to make that internal case, get people on the same page about this.
Yeah, I will probably have to pull from previous experience more than my current role, because as I mentioned, I'm very lucky, and I know everybody is not that lucky, but I work with a small team, and our governance, our board, our leadership council all understand the importance of marketing and investing in that space. I will say when I've worked at larger organizations or even smaller nonprofits that are really tight with their budgets, it's very difficult to communicate to people that like you kind of have to spend money to make money, and also that it's very important to separate your marketing and communications team from your development team. Those people should not be the same people. And I think that's a really big struggle that happens internally for all of us at nonprofits, because you're limited in the amount of people that you can bring in and be in those roles. And I think it's really important to advocate for a space in your organization where communications and marketing is king. That is the focus, and that is what you're doing. And those people support the development team, they support the program team, they support the executive team in real and solid ways, and also that are data-driven ways, because I think that's like a space that we're really leaning into as a marketing world, but that they aren't always tied to development goals. They have their own internal strategic goals that line up with your organization's goals, but that are very focused on marketing, brand awareness, storytelling, communications in a way that allows you to find the best and brightest that are in the communications and marketing world to fill those roles, instead of trying to have somebody that's doing both development and strategic comms and trying to like somehow spread that bandwidth. And it's really unrealistic.
Yeah, great.
I couldn't agree more. And just this is a completely different challenge, but something I think that comes up with a lot of different organizations is to the point about storytelling. So I think a lot of things that we do, we try to tell these incredible stories, but a lot of them are sensitive or they, involve children, and we think that, how do we communicate those stories? How do we protect our children that we serve, but also, get their voices heard? I think there are kind of two different points with that. What we've seen at Big Brothers Big Sisters is, one, you'd be surprised, but most people want their voice to be heard, and they want their story shared. and there are ways that we can do it to be very empowering. And then the other point about that is to think about who tells the story. So, we've had a lot of our volunteers tell the story of our children, so our bigs. And it's really nice because they see them in such a wonderful light, and they bring that child to life in a way that makes it very empowering and motivational. And I think just consider who's telling the story. That would be my advice on that.
Very good. Okay. And I see that, Jolyn, you're chatting in that you struggled to be in the right room at the right time for the right conversations. Is that something that you two face as well? Like, you hear about a conversation that happened that you could have lent really good insight on, but you weren't invited to that conversation because people didn't think it was comms or marketing place?
Yeah.
Always.
Always. Yeah. And I mean, like, that's overarching advocate to be in the room, right? Like, be in the room where it happens. But I do think that trying to find opportunities to, depending how large or small your organization is, but finding opportunities to speak to the heads of different departments and make sure that you have continuous touch bases with them that allow you to understand exactly what's going on in a holistic way. Because I've found in both large and small organizations, at ADA, we had something that was created that was called the synchronization calendar, where we would make sure that like everyone at different heads of different departments was on, like, had an overarching view of what meetings were going on with strategic partners and sponsors, like what advocacy days were happening, etc. At A Better Chicago, we're smaller, so I'm able to kind of walk over to someone and say, hey, can we have monthly touch bases or quarterly touch bases, and make sure that I am part of the conversation and that they're thinking about me always when it comes to a communication side of whatever initiative they're working on. And I think you can kind of force yourself gently into the space in a way that just says, I'm working on my strategic calendar for the next quarter and want to make sure that I'm highlighting the work that you're doing at the same time that, like, I already know what's coming down the pike for my initiative, and I'm including all of that in a really strategic way that builds on itself.
Okay. Yeah, great. Really helpful insight, and I think something that no matter small or big, well-funded, not so well-funded, you're going to face in this role at any organization. So I agree, advocate for yourself, figure out how to get in the room when you should be there, continually try to educate people about the role that marketing should be playing, the conversations that you can contribute to, because quite honestly, even well-intentioned people just have no idea how broad and wide marketing and comms impact can be at the organization. Okay, so moving on to our next question, we, as you heard at Prosper, believe that to see this first commitment through, marketing really needs to play a role in every goal that you set in your strategic plan at your organization and beyond your strategic plan. So tell us what you two are doing, if anything, to sync your strategic plans up with your marketing and comms plans, whether formally or just informally through, a study of those plans and thinking about how that changes your strategy. And along with that, I'd just love to hear what some of the goals are that you brought into your marketing and comms plans that go beyond that raising awareness and raising funds, those two goals that are, kind of more typical of a nonprofit marketing and comms department. But I'd love to hear how you're thinking about things kind of beyond that creatively.
Sure. So we at Big Brothers Big Sisters have set up a strategic plan for the next 5 years, and it's a growth plan. And actually, one of the things we're doing is raising money for marketing. So we've kind of even put it on its head. I will start off with the fact, though, that the first thing I did when I got there was create a marketing plan and align it to our business objectives. So where our business objectives are obvious ones: bring in more volunteers, bring in more donations. We align those to specific measurable goals. But we are now also, like I said, raising money, and marketing is one strategic component of that, because for us, it directly leads to recruitment, outreach, and engagement with our organization. To your point, though, of bringing something beyond awareness, one thing that I've really noticed at our organization that's really important for us is we are working on being in some high-risk and high-need communities right now, and we're bringing mentorship to those communities. So for us, marketing is not only about making sure that those children are served, but it's about changing the rhetoric in those areas.
Yeah.
So what does a mentor look like? What does a healthy relationship look like? What does a role model look like? You know, a lot of kids in Chicagoland communities have mentors.
Right.
Every one of them does. That could be a gang member, you know? So we're going in there and we're changing the way we communicate things about things. And that's a huge thing that we all can do as nonprofit marketers. And I just think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and what you're speaking to is really using marketing and communications beyond just your organization's goals and to create behavior change, to educate, to change the dialogue in our communities, because your mission isn't well served if people have the perception of mentorship as, you know, something that could potentially be harmful or lead children down the wrong path. And yes, we need to drive our goals forward, but often before we can even start to do that, there's an education and social change, behavior change component to our work that's really, really essential.
Yeah.
And how about you, Danny?
So as I said, I am lucky to have a very strategic team that did think about our strategic plan for the next 5 years in a way that looks at our growth and our access and kind of in general, basically just trying to affect as much change in the way that children have access to, and students at every age have access to a great education, not just an okay education, but we're talking about the type of education that will change their lives and get them to a family-sustaining career.
Right.
And so a lot of that is, like Kristine was saying, changing the language around how people think about success for a student. Like, is it just getting them to high school graduation? Is it just getting them to college graduation or into college? But in our mindset, because our mission is to end poverty in Chicago, that means getting them to a career.
Right.
And so that has changed the way that we talk about how we work with our grantees and the types of grantees that we're looking for, because we're always looking for more organizations that have proven success and proven educational outcomes that we can invest in. So like our audience is twofold in that way. Like we're even sending, like the messaging that we're trying to send out is also, are you doing amazing work? Would you fit in our portfolio? Right. But also to donors, do you want to see more come out of your dollars? Do you want to see your impact amplified? And we can do that for you.
Right.
And so a lot of that is changing feelings and thought processes around where you invest your donations, how you invest those donations, and why we're a great place for you to do that. But then also telling that storytelling of if the kids that are part of our grantee programs are excelling at insane rates, right?
Yeah.
And what do those benchmarks look like in a data-driven world? And then what does that look like in a human head versus heart,
right,
and connecting the two.
Stories versus data.
Exactly. And we are very data-driven. So like a lot of our support comes from people that love that data, that love the idea of, all right, if I donate this amount of money, I can see exactly what's happening in the process of a student's life and how the grantees that you're supporting are changing that trajectory. So it's really nice for me because I can very easily see where like my marketing and communications plan can align perfectly with those goals that we have.
Right.
But it's also really fun to get creative about what that can look like. Are we talking partnerships and, you know, corporate sponsors and corporate partnerships in ways that align our brand with Chicago and like its citizens and maybe expats that don't live in Chicago anymore but still care about the city, which is a large portion of our community. So it's just, it really lines up very nicely with our strategic plan, and I'm lucky that our strategic plan is so clearly aligned with what we want to do on a communication level. Yeah.
You're lucky, but you're also thinking about it in a way that not everyone does. So they're lucky to have the same turn. And I hope that this is giving you sparking ideas for some of you on the line here, just about things that maybe are outside of the traditional realm of what you would expect or think about marketing being able to do, and allow you to get a little bit more creative. I think they both have great examples just of different approaches that might not be the first thing that comes to mind when you think about marketing, but even if you're not doing some of the sorts of things that Kristine and Danny are talking about, to be able to use their examples and to be able to say, you know, here's what some other organizations have been able to do by applying comms and marketing in different and creative ways, I think you can start to open people's minds a little bit.
And I would just add that I know for a better Chicago, our values are really important to us, our internal values, and how we communicate those to an external world. And that aligns with how we hire, with how we talk about, what the work we do looks like every day to us as people working in that space. And so I would encourage everyone to think about how you communicate what it looks like to be on your team and why the people that are in the room at your organization are so great and so valuable. And that's a different kind of marketing that's very internal, but also can become an external lever for you to use.
Right, absolutely. And I think at most of our organizations, our people really are our greatest asset, right? And our impact is only possible because of the people on our team. So being able to communicate how they're the living, breathing embodiment of your values and your mission and how they're driving it forward, it can be a huge differentiator for an organization that does it well, both externally and internally as you work on talent acquisition as well. So next month's webinar is on the topic of aligning your brand with your mission and values, and we'll talk a lot about that topic on next month's webinar as well. So moving on to our next question here. This one is for you, Kristine, specifically, because you worked in an agency environment, as you mentioned, when you gave your introduction, and most of your clients or a lot of your clients were in the corporate sector. So I'd love to hear now with, your new-ish role at Big Brothers Big Sisters, how you think the perception of the power and importance of marketing is different, right? It's obviously very different, but what would you highlight as the differences between the corporate world and the nonprofit world?
Sure. So there's the obvious one that we've talked about a lot today, which is, having marketing on the budget. So that's a definite one. But something that is maybe not so obvious and something that we see a lot in the agency world and the corporate world is we really focus on brands. So we focus on, what people think of brands, how we feel when we interact with those brands. And it's all about creating that feeling and just a lot of importance around the actual brand itself. We miss that in the nonprofit world. We at Big Brothers Big Sisters were so focused on what we do, and we looked at changing a lot of our regulations to strategically grow. So what do we need to do? And the fact of the matter is, if we stuck to our mission, because our mission has been around for over 100 years. That doesn't need to change. We don't need to change what we do. We need to change how people see us. So that is something that we in the nonprofit world really just need to look at and think about.
Agreed. And we'll get to your recent rebrand, the national organization's recent rebrand, which obviously you played a role in at local level here. Talk about that more in a minute, because I think that's a really good example of prioritization of brand and changes that needed to be made without changing your mission. Okay, very good. And if any of you are not aware, Big Brothers Big Sisters did go through a recent rebrand. When was that? October of this year. So while we're on, if you want to look up the new brand, we'll be talking about that more in a minute. But I think it's definitely interesting to see the comparison between old and new as we prepare for that question down the road. All right, and then Danny, over to you, because you've been through a bunch of different roles in the nonprofit sector, worn many different hats, I'm sure, as I like to say. So I'm curious what you see as the biggest misconceptions related to the role of marketing in the nonprofit sector as a whole, within and outside of organizations. We talked about a lot of them at the beginning of this conversation about overhead and that sort of thing, but what's the most problematic kind of across the different roles that you've experienced?
I would say strategically figuring out whether things are in-house or whether you need to hire an external consultant or firm or expert to make certain things happen for you. So I think most of the people on the line probably are aligned with me and Kristine when it comes to, and also Prosper, when it comes to creating goal setting based on your goals and objectives for whatever your initiative is that focuses on a marketing support. And making sure that everything kind of goes back to that. So do you have in-house the talent that you need to make this happen? Do you need to change your goals and objectives to make sure that you have the people on your team that can make those happen? And I do think that budget aligns a lot with that in a almost negative way, though, because you can do a lot with the people that you have. So maybe start with what you already have internally and see where you can amplify that by bringing on external support. And I know when I was at a boutique firm and working for nonprofit clients, and you've probably experienced this too, Alyssa, it was kind of, okay, do all of it for me.
Yeah.
Like, we just don't have anyone in-house that's doing any of this. So can you create and, like, lay out a whole strategy
The entire marketing
the entire team? And that's just not realistic, and also not smart business. And no corporation would ever do that, right? Like, you have to think of your nonprofit as a business in very real ways.
Right.
And that means creating a team that can address all the needs that you have in-house and be bolstered by the external support that you bring in, not reliant on the external support that you bring in, because it makes it really hard for, as consultants, for us to be successful, and also for you as your organization to be successful in a way that can be sustainable,
right?
And continue, right?
No, totally.
So I think that's probably what I ran into the most, and it happened at American Diabetes Association, which was like 500 people strong, and also at smaller nonprofits that had like a team of 10.
Right.
So I think being realistic is a difficult misconception for nonprofits to get over. It's like, what can you do? Can you do something great with a smaller, initiative and make the impact that you're looking for, or does it have to be a year-long strategy?
Right.
How can you get to the goal that you're trying to reach? And the way that we were talking about strategic planning, that should be happening in your marketing team and your communications team in a way that is sustainable.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make you trying to do a $1 million campaign with $2,500.
Yeah.
Right.
And no time.
Exactly, and no time and no data that is driving like the realistic outcomes that you're trying to get. So I would say that's the biggest thing that I see.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And going back to what Danny said about, the choice about what you should do internally and what you should do externally, I think it may be counterintuitive to say that my agency, and I think most agency partners, prefer if you have a more robust marketing and communications function internally. Sounds like, okay, well, doesn't that leave less work on the table for us? And maybe, but it leaves for us the areas where we can be most effective to come in and help you build capacity, fill in gaps. We have done it all. We've worked with organizations that wanted Prosper to be their entire outsourced marketing department and function. We've worked with organizations that had robust marketing and comms teams, ones that had, one-person teams, and everything in between. And our best relationships are really those that have robust marketing and comms teams and have someone guiding the ship internally on the strategy. We are a very strategic firm. We can absolutely help there, but all these challenges we're talking about, with internal misconceptions about what marketing can and should do, are that much harder if you have no internal marketing function. And you really need that person who's embedded in the organization, who's navigating the relationships with other departments and functions to advocate for the role of marketing. And then for sure, an agency can come in and be really, really helpful. And just to kind of bounce off of the second part you said is, let's be realistic about what we can and should do. Also completely agree with that. And I think so often what we see is organizations that are really passionate. They have a lot of great idea people who have a lot of kind of fire behind their ideas, and they want to make them happen, and they go after them full force, but they're often not choosing or prioritizing the most impactful ideas on the mission and on the goals, and they're not, even if the idea is going to be impactful, they don't have a way to measure it, and they're therefore trying to do a whole bunch at once, and none of it is necessarily that effective on the mission. So both things that I would challenge you all to kind of be advocates for changing within your organizations and thinking about a little bit differently. Sort of like Danny said, what 2-3 kind of strategic pieces can you focus on advancing first and foremost, really make an impact that's measurable across a couple of very specific areas, and then grow from there rather than trying to do a whole bunch halfway. Thank you. Passionate about that topic for sure.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah.
We would be on the same page.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on here. So as I mentioned, promised, because I know a lot of you are probably here to hear more about this, I wanted to get to this topic of Big Brothers Big Sisters recent rebrand. And I'd love to hear, I guess, just what you can share, Kristine, and kind of pull back the curtain on that process, what the motivation was for it, what you know about what it looks like on a national level, and then what it was like for you here on the local level. But I'm also interested in just hearing how this choice to rebrand was or was not a reflection of the organization's kind of prioritization of brand and marketing and changes in the perception of those things at Big Brothers Big Sisters.
So the beauty of this rebrand, I would say that, a lot of times rebrands can be very painful for a lot of people, but this one was beautiful because it was based on the business objective. So the business objective was, well, I guess it was a business challenge. Nationally, Big Brothers Big Sisters was losing growth numbers. So we were declining in number of children served across the nation. So our organization here in Chicago has continuously grown, and we've had different pockets like that, but that's because we've had to focus on marketing.
Right.
So the national agency really, paid attention to that, and they put together a research component to everything. So I would say before doing anything, start with data. That is your biggest ally. It will help with leadership and governance. It will help communicate what you need to do, and you can always point back to the return on it. But we did a research study, and really what we saw is that generationally, we were declining in brand recognition and relevance, and we were also gaining brand confusion. Mm-hmm. So I've seen a couple of you here on the line from Boys and Girls Club. I often say that I'm from Big Brothers Big Sisters, and people say, how is it at Boys and Girls Club? I just told you I don't work for Boys and Girls Club. Anyways, that tells us a lot. It tells us that we need to think about who we are and how we resonate and what people know about us. So we completely rebranded. We have a way more modern look. You can go and look at our old logo. Our old logo looks like a heart. It's purple. It's primary colors. It looks like a young, really little. And we serve kids up to 18 years old, which for people in Chicago is huge because we're dealing with issues of gun violence and things that impact kids at all sorts of ages. So we needed to change the perception of who we serve, but also, become more relevant to millennials and new generations coming up. So we have definitely a more modern feel, younger, and yeah.
That's great. And look it up if you haven't already, attendees on the line. I think it's a really great example. And I'm personally, how Kristine and I got connected is I'm a big, and I'm personally so excited to see the organization go through this rebrand because obviously an organization I won't volunteer for, I want to succeed. And I was sensing what your data proved about your old brand, that it was causing some of these issues with the different types of declines you mentioned. And I'll be really interested to see if you're able to report back in a couple of years, right, about how this impacts that. But I'm so thrilled to see the change, and it's just for me a shining example of we don't have the data yet, of course, but the role that I think brand can play in really driving mission.
Absolutely. And I think what we're already seeing without even having the data to back it up is that now every agency has a consistent look.
Yeah.
And something for, anyone on the line that has a bunch of affiliates or even just internally, if you have a team of 5, make sure you are consistent because that drives your brand.
Yes.
If you are not, saying the same thing and looking the same way, it hurts your brand.
Absolutely. There's no way it doesn't. And even the smallest things can hurt your credibility, right, when it comes to inconsistencies. So that'll come up more in webinar, 4, not next month, but the month after that. So stay tuned for more on consistency and cohesion across brands and especially in federated organizations. That's a unique challenge. Okay. Well, really exciting times for your organization, and we'll wait for a progress report on the data about what it does. So this is for both of you, I think. In your opinion, I'd love to hear what you feel an organization that really truly prioritizes marketing and communications as tools for mission impact, what that organization looks like. What does the team look like? Danny, you talked a little bit about what the agencies could look like. What does the budget look like? What kind of expertise do you have? What does other leadership outside of marketing and comms look like? That sort of thing. So give us a sense of that. And if it's not, no organization is perfect. So I'm not asking you to say this is what our organization exactly is made up of, looks like, but in your ideal world, what would this look like?
I so many wishes. I would say start from top down, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, start with your governance. Does your board have somebody that has background in marketing and communications? Does your board believe that marketing and communications is important? Are they getting regular updates on how marketing and communications are impacting your overarching goals? And I think that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the organization, because no matter what, let's be honest, if we've ever, and I'm sure people on the line have, if you've ever worked for an organization where nobody above you cares at all about marketing or communications, your work is 10 times more difficult at every point, because you're always trying to prove that your role is important, and you're always trying to find ways to influence people outside of your team that you need to be in the room for strategy and building and all of those steps. And so it has to be top down. I think you have to advocate for having someone on your board or a committee on your board. It would be even more amazing. That is all focused on marketing and communications and what that looks like as a successful strategy. And then throughout the organization, I really do, like, I believe 500% that you have to separate development and communications and marketing. And so I think those are really, that shows that you care about communications and marketing in a separate way than growing your donation.
So that's not the only thing.
Exactly.
And
it's not the
comms
only
and marketing
role that
can
it plays.
support
Exactly.
that, but it's not the only function.
Exactly. And I mean, we're nonprofits, so fundraising is important. Like, we all know that going into that role, but being able to very clearly delineate what initiatives mean a fundraising goal, what initiatives are a brand awareness goal, and separating those in a true way so that it doesn't feel like you're trying to achieve both at the same time with everything that you're doing. Yeah. Because that's just not realistic. You have to start to think, all right, this initiative or this campaign is all about awareness. And if we raise the money, that's great. But, like, our primary goal is not both raising money and growing awareness. Right. Yeah. And so I think having an organization and a team that thinks that way is really important.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Kristine?
I mean, I completely agree with all those points. And then the other thing is if there's any way to communicate this to the team, I do think that a lot of people envision the marketing person to wear every single hat. So, you know, I come from the agency world and I'm an account person. But when I came on board to Big Brothers Big Sisters, it was expected that I was an account person and the creative director and the graphic designer and the Can we look at these like an agency? I mean, in my ideal world, we would function to have all those roles, because we're not going into our nonprofits and saying, oh, you're an accountant, can you also be a salesperson? So I think, you know, it's communicating what those functions look like and why there are talents and skills in different roles and responsibilities.
Right. Yeah. So important, and a challenge, I think, again, at any organization. And part of the reason we're here having this conversation, right, is to change the perception. So if you need to make the case, feel free to send around this webinar recording to others on your team and let them know that you're not alone and feeling that you shouldn't wear every single hat on your marketing team and be an agency and the marketing director and the strategist and all of that at the same time. Okay, fun things. So let's just end with a quick thought, a 30-second thought on the biggest piece of advice you have, and then we'll go to audience Q&A, of course. The biggest piece of advice you have for those who really want to commit to starting their own marketing revolution, making marketing a tool for mission advancement and social change in 2019.
Yeah, okay. Data. I think, like, we said this probably like 5 million times, but I do think coming to the table with data that aligns with what your goals are for the year and being able to say it is most important for me to do these top 3 things with our entire team. As a cohesive organization, the marketing team will lead these initiatives, but this is something that everybody has to buy into, because otherwise you won't be successful. And I mean, it's January. I think most of us are in planning mode for the rest of the year and looking at how we're going to achieve the goals that we might have already set for 2019. And I think being able to say, all right, these are my goals. These are the numbers that I'm trying to reach. These are the data points that show that these are important numbers for us to reach as an organization. And that will be obviously very subjective to you, but thinking through a lens of how can I be as data-driven in my role as possible, because that allows your boss to advocate for you, that allows your boss's boss to advocate for you. It really puts you in a position to say, like, I've set these objectives and these goals. If I don't meet them, I'm going to explain to you why this hasn't worked and how we need to change trajectory.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, we both agreed that was the biggest thing, is to start with a data point or a business objective and work on it from there. And it can be small. I think I encourage people to do that. I mean, maybe in smaller communities, it can be develop one media relationship per month.
Yeah.
Something where you could get the word out there, just focus on something which would strategically align to, a particular objective of whether it's awareness or volunteer yield or anything like that.
So good. So many great insights here. We could keep talking forever, but I want to make sure we get some time for audience Q&A. So we will go to 3:15 Eastern, 2:15 Central. So we have about 15 minutes for questions, and I am going to scroll back here and take a couple that have come in already in our questions pane. But if you still have a burning question that you haven't typed in yet, now would be the time to do that. We'll get to, like I said, as many as we can, and then we'll circle back in our blog post after the webinar with more informational questions we couldn't get to if possible. So the first one is really relevant to what we were just talking about, data. Data and measurement should be top of mind for everyone going into this year and always. So this is a heady question, and one that I'm not sure any of us will have the perfect answer to, but we can each give it a try. So Zachary Grimshaw asks, how do you measure impact from marketing beyond outcomes? Who wants to take the first crack at that?
I can offer something. It's funny, I come from a very data-driven background and program, so it's hard. But let's think about quantitative versus qualitative, right? So, when we're doing this, we actually always follow up with every single board meeting that we have. We bring in data on our marketing objectives, and we also provide a mission moment. So at each board meeting, we will, show the impact that we've had by either bringing in we call them a match, the big and the little, or we, get a story together, or we do quotes, or we do something that just makes it real. And I think just like really, doing storytelling and making sure you have a constant stream of that content is really important. And I know that's just kind of how we show impact in a different way.
Right.
I would definitely say storytelling is a space that doesn't really have numbers associated with it that can kind of show exactly the impact that you're having in your community. I come from more of a storytelling to earned media background. So I would say also for any earned media folks, like we're growing out of the impression world a little bit into a more kind of qualitative space when it comes to sharing what a story means. So like there was a time when getting your CEO on ABC News was a huge deal. Right. And everybody was seeing that. We no longer really live in that world. And so being able to kind of share that a story in, the Chronicle of Philanthropy is more valuable than a piece in the Washington Post can sometimes be like that kind of storytelling qualitative piece that you need. And I think that trying to find organizations that are comparable to yours and be able to share the thought leadership that you have at your organization versus the thought leadership that they have at theirs can also show where you're falling in the totem pole, right? And be able to tell a story of we've grown over the past year and being now, like you get more inquiries from specific topic-based outlets that really align with what you're doing versus, we were able to get 2 stories on national news and that led to probably not that much impact. So trying to find a way of creating a very subjective and focused based on why things matter that you were able to secure, whether they're hashtags or social media growth or actual media stories or thought leadership, op-eds, or speaking on a panel. Like those opportunities that don't actually align with a number might be ways to share impact.
Really good thoughts. I'll just add one very brief thought, since we talked a lot about qualitative and storytelling to report back on results. I do think that we all can do more to think about quantitative reporting as well, and I think it's really challenging and really fraught, just as any kind of measurement in the nonprofit sector is challenging and fraught with problems. But what I would encourage everyone to do is just in really simple ways, maybe choosing one thing to focus on, is work backward. So either using your strategic plan, or ideally even a step further than that if you have one, using your theory of change, right? Think about what the actual outcomes are that you're looking to drive, what the changes you're looking to drive, and choose one or two specific outcomes that the organization, not that marketing is looking to drive, but that the organization is looking to drive. Work backward and think through how your marketing program, your communications program is doing a whole variety of things, right? That might be driving toward that outcome. And then see where you have an opportunity in small ways to measure the marketing's impact on whatever those outcomes might be. So just a really simple example, you might have a theory of change or strategic plan goal around growing impact in a specific community. And so let's say that's the theory of change, is that you need to have impact in this community to achieve your mission. In the strategic plan, you might have a specific objective around growing your volunteer presence in that specific community, right? And then mapping back to that some marketing goals, you might be doing things from a marketing perspective, like social media advertising or really hyper-targeted community media outreach in that community. And so you can then take the marketing metrics for those specific things, and where possible, and in the digital world, sometimes it is possible, you may be able to link up to that and say, our social media ads acquired 700 leads of volunteers, 300 of which became volunteers, and then that feeds back to our strategic goal of growing volunteers, which feeds into our theory of change of increasing our presence in this community, right? So you have to work backward, and you have to think about one little tiny piece at a time, because I think if you think about it globally, it becomes extremely overwhelming and difficult. But remember that you don't have to provide metrics for every single thing. That if you can provide a few key data points, and along with a whole bunch of great qualitative things like Danny and Kristine mentioned, if you can get a couple of quantitative numbers in there that prove, okay, this really does have a connection and it does work, that's typically enough to illustrate for people, whether it's your leadership or your funders or others, that there is an impact here. So focus where you can on the most important metrics, but even, any metrics are better than none, right? And tie back to the strategic plan where you can. Okay, we could talk about that for a long time. This question comes from Monica Hayes, and she asks if, Kristine, if you could elaborate on the touch points that you added, one or two maybe even just as examples, to maintain the connection between bigs and littles throughout the peers relationship.
Sure. So what was interesting is before I came on board, we had this policy almost of not bothering the volunteers with too much other, because we already asked them for so much.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I felt like we were looking at it the wrong way. So we were looking at it as, okay, we shouldn't invite them to this event because they'd have to purchase tickets to this event, and they're already spending their money to go out on outings with their littles. And it's like, we're not including them. They have no idea what's going on, and they're our most engaged. Not only do they want to be engaged with us and they love what they do and they want to share it and they want to meet other volunteers, they are potentially our biggest ambassadors, right? So it was a huge missed opportunity. So, now what we do is we have a cadence of communication with them. So whether it's inviting them to our events, providing special discounts to like our young professionals events. We do social media contests with them. So, with particular hashtags where we'll have like different incentives for them to share things, because they're going on outings and it just encourages them to share what they're doing for other bigs. We provide them with social media assets and tools and fundraising platforms so that they can spread the word and help us either find more donors or recruit more bigs. Yeah.
I will say on the end user end of this, I've noticed it, and it has an impact. I feel more involved and engaged in the organization than I would otherwise by far. I think I still could do a lot more to promote the great work that you're doing and, use my match as an example, but I know I have the tools, right? And that's the big thing is give your spokespeople who really are all of your donors, your volunteers, your staff, your board, give them the tools and create those connections. Okay, we have so many good questions coming in. We'll try to get as many as we can answered within the blog post, but I'm going to take just one more so that we have time to wrap up here. And this is something that I still scratch my head about, so I'd love to hear your take. There's no perfect answer. But Danny, you and I have talked about this, so I'll go to you on this one. How do you distinguish between marketing and communications, or do you?
Growing up in the communications world, we did. I feel like I always thought I was more strategic communications than marketing until maybe like 2 years ago, where it just seemed like everything was merging into the same thing. I do believe that marketing tends to be aligned with the idea of sales, which is why like this whole idea of kind of changing this nonprofit manifesto is perfect, because I do think people think marketing aligns with sales and aligns with like data, right? And you're following that user through how did I get you to purchase something and are you going to purchase it again?
Right.
And I always thought of communications and thought of strategic communications particularly as like an integrated process, right? You're talking about how to get somebody to do something, whether that's advocate for something or volunteer or donate or whatever that move is, and how you're going to engage them over the long run throughout your relationship with them. And then layering onto that earned media outreach and the usual, like the usual typical communications roles, right? Social media, digital marketing, etc. And so it's very interesting because I think even organizations outline communications and marketing differently on their teams, and it's hard for me to stop changing the way I talk about marketing versus communication. But I have to say they're kind of merging into the same thing at this point. Like even digital marketing is no longer really a thing. All marketing is digital.
And all digital marketing, all marketing is communication.
Exactly. So it's really all about like the strategy of communicating to an external world, and then also to your internal stakeholders. How do you communicate to the rest of your team, and how do you communicate to your board and your governance, and that all kind of folding into one team.
Right. Yeah, and I'll just add a quick thought to that. It's my personal opinion. We've struggled with this a lot just in terms of calling what we do, but it's my personal opinion that marketing is the broader reaching kind of umbrella term, and that communications falls under marketing in many ways. And we've made the deliberate decision at Prosper to use the marketing language for that reason, but also because of what you just said, that marketing feels a little more tied to outcomes and impact, whereas communications, I think, as important as we all know on the line it is, it sometimes has a perception as a little bit softer, more nebulous, less data-driven. And so we like the idea of using marketing as an umbrella under which communications is probably the most important piece in the nonprofit world. That's how we like to think about it. But I will say we see everything at the organizations we work with in terms of how they title their departments and structure their teams, title their staff. So there's no wrong answer. It's more about how you talk about what each of these functions does. And I think communications can play more of a marketing role. Marketing can play more of a communications role. It depends on your needs, right? So I wouldn't worry too much about the language, but I would worry about what people understand the impact of those two functions to be within the organization. Okay. Well, we're right at time here, so I am going to go ahead and wrap us up with one final question, and that is, are you ready for your own marketing revolution? I hope your answer is yes. If you're feeling really excited, you can type it in the chat box. But if you are, a couple of ways that you can kind of keep up with us here and keep up with the discussion about the commitments in the manifesto. So at this first link, you'll find the first webinar, which was a kind of teaser and introduction to all the commitments in the manifesto. We've also linked the manifesto itself again here, so you can get the electronic version in the PDF. And then if you ever need more help talking some of this through and thinking about where an agency could plug in, possibly you have our contact page as the third link here. We first and foremost want to be an educational resource. This is not a sales pitch in any way, but we also want to be helpful if it makes sense. So also we'll just leave you with my contact information and our URL here. You can reach out to me directly. we will be sending around this webinar recording and the slides, hopefully with our little difficulty getting on the line cut out from the beginning, but we really appreciate you all sticking with us despite that technical difficulty. I can promise you that we will be switching over from GoToWebinar, from Zoom to GoToWebinar for the rest of our sessions, because I just bought an entire year of GoToWebinar while we were on the outage on Zoom. So new information to come about our next webinar, but it'll be with Erin Walton, who's the Executive Director of Resilience. We recently supported Resilience through a rebrand. The organization used to go by the name of Rape Victim Advocates, and we helped them through the very challenging process of choosing a new name, launching their new brand, and really doing that in a way that was aligned with their mission. So we'll be talking about the importance of aligning your brand with your mission and values in the nonprofit sector. That's commitment number 2 on next month's webinar. It is February 6th, I believe. You can register for all webinars on the link that I shared on the previous page, but we'll also be promoting the next webinar very shortly here, probably beginning sometime next week. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be together again on GoToWebinar next time, and just really want to thank Danny and Kristine for being here with us today. I hope the audience learned as much from you as I did. I thought you were fantastic and just shared so many great insights. So thanks for being an inspiration to all of us, and we will share the rest of your questions with them and hopefully have some more answers for you within our blog post. Thanks, everyone.